Hello and welcome to the Iowa State University Extension and Outreach Master Gardener Winter Webcast Series. Today's webcast is called Food Security Partners, and I'm Susan DeBleek, the Assistant Coordinator for the Iowa Master Gardener Program. We're offering 3 Growing Together webcasts this winter with support from the USDA SNAP Education Program. This webinar is on food security partners and is the final of the series of 3. Today we're going to be learning about how Master Gardeners in Iowa are helping to build community food security and new ideas for you to take back to your Master Gardener projects. And we're also going to talk about partnerships with 4-H volunteers and youth to make your Master Gardener program go further. We'll start with the Partnerships with 4-H presentation, which is 45 minutes long, and then we'll go on to the Reimagining Food Access part of the presentation, which is 30 minutes long. Today we've got for you a worksheet so you can follow along with the presentations, and also please fill out the online evaluation on the link provided on your worksheet. And if you are a Master Gardener, please be sure to log your continuing education hours. Each of these webinars is eligible for 2 continuing education hours, and we hope that your time is well spent having really great discussions today and learning about these projects. Our first presenters today are Laura Liechty and Tillie Good from the Iowa State University Extension and Outreach 4-H program.
As Susan mentioned, my name is Tillie Good, Volunteer Development Specialist with Iowa 4-H Youth Development, and joining me is Laura Liechty, 4-H Healthy Living Program Specialist. The focus during our time together is to highlight ways Master Gardeners can connect or impact the Iowa 4-H Youth Development Program. We will begin by sharing a little background of our program, then feature one of our program areas, Healthy Living, and finally wrap up by sharing potential volunteer opportunities. To begin, why do you think Iowa 4-H does what it does? Our mission is to empower youth to reach their full potential through youth-adult partnerships and research-based experiences. Iowa 4-H Youth Development has created a 4-H equation to help us intentionally carry out this mission. As you can see, the formula includes our reason plus our method plus our mission to help us reach our results. To reach our results of productive citizens, outstanding communicators, effective leaders, and successful learners, 4-H begins the equation with our reason. How does 4-H help young people reach these outcomes? Key to helping young people reach these outcomes are caring adults. Volunteers, parents, and staff develop programming and experiences based on youth development research, which emphasizes the importance of meeting the 4 basic human needs of belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity. Studies indicate that youth whose needs are met in positive ways are likely to develop into active citizens and contributing members of their families and communities. These 4 needs are belonging. Youth need to know they are cared about by others and feel a sense of connection to others in group settings. 4-H gives youth the opportunity to feel physically and emotionally safe while actively participating in a group. Mastery. Youth need to feel and believe they are capable and experience success at solving problems and meeting challenges to develop their self-confidence. Through the exploration of ideas and activities related to their interests, youth learn skills and participate in experiences that help them make positive life choices for their future. Independence. Youth need to know that they are able to influence people and events through decision-making and action. By exercising independence through 4-H leadership opportunities, youth mature in self-discipline and responsibility and learn to better understand themselves. Generosity. Youth need to feel their lives have meaning and purpose. By exploring 4-H community service and citizenship activities, youth can connect to communities and learn to give back to others.
Now, I'd like to pause for a few minutes to allow you some time to reflect and discuss the 4 needs. Think back to your youth. Who helped you belong to a group? What did this adult do to connect with you? Mastery. Think of one way you can help 4-H youth or community members master a skill. Independence. What is your definition of independence? Generosity. How can Master Gardeners help model generosity to 4-H youth or program participants? Take a few minutes to reflect on these questions and jot down your answers for 1, 2, or all of the questions. Then, turn to a neighbor and share your response to one of the questions. We will gather back together in 5 minutes. Next, we have our method in the 4-H equation, which is also known as the essential elements. There are 8 essential elements that we intentionally integrate into our program or events to support positive youth development. A caring adult is actively involved as an advisor, guide, and mentor. The adult helps set boundaries and expectations for young people and could also be called supporter, friend, and advocate. This element supports the need for belonging. Safe environment. Caring adults make sure that young people do not experience physical or emotional harm while participating in 4-H, whether from the learning environment itself, adults, other participants, or spectators. This element supports the need for belonging. Inclusive setting. An inclusive setting fosters a sense of belonging in all members. It encourages and supports the members and offers encouragement with positive and specific feedback. Healthy groups celebrate the success of all members, taking pride in the collective efforts of all. Mastery. Mastery is the building of knowledge, skills, and attitudes, and then demonstrating their use. The level of mastery depends on the ability or interest of the individual youth. It is a process that evolves, sometimes over a period of years, and is not a one-time experience. Adults support the 4-H concept of experiential learning, learning by doing. Service. Finding oneself begins with losing the self in the service of others. Adults guide youth in identifying community needs, planning a course of action, then acting, reflecting, and learning, and celebrating the experience and accomplishments. Service is a way for members to gain exposure and contribute to the larger community and the world itself. It is necessary to actively practice and uphold service in order to develop a sense of generosity. Self-determination. Believing that one has impact over life's events rather than passively submitting to the will and whims of others is self-determination. Caring adults help 4-H members foster a personal sense of influence over their own lives, exercising their potential to become self-directing, autonomous adults. This element directly supports youth's need for independence. Planning for the future. The opportunity to see oneself as an active participant in the future is crucial to the development of young people. The ability to see oneself in the future is to harness the hope and optimism to shape life choices to facilitate the transition into active participation in future events. It allows for the development of independence. Engaged learning. An engaged youth is one who is mindful of the subject area while building interpersonal and intrapersonal relations and connections in order to develop greater understanding. Through self-reflection, the brain has the ability to self-correct and learn from experience. The engaged learner has a high degree of self-motivation and an unending capacity to create. This element has its basis in both mastery and independence. One of the things I love most about 4-H is that we focus on hands-on learning. We provide youth all kinds of opportunities to experience life skills, to practice them, and be able to use them throughout their lifetime. This practice is called experiential learning. A supportive, caring adult helps youth discover what they are learning as part of their experiences and to pursue deeper understanding to be able to apply what was learned in other life situations. 4-H youth programs promote life skill development through the use of a 5-step experiential learning model. Experiential learning can occur when youth are involved in a project or activity in which they look back at their experience critically, determine what was useful or important to remember, apply this new information in real-life situations, and are encouraged to think, work harder, and ultimately learn more thoroughly than is possible through just showing or telling. Volunteers can facilitate such learning through the experiential learning model by setting aside time for reflecting on the experience, asking the right questions, planning developmentally appropriate experiences that lead to reflection, listening carefully, and supporting each youth's unique learning style. The 5 steps of the experiential learning model are experience. This is the do part. the hands-on action step. The next two are part of reflection. Share, describe what was done. Process, identify common themes and discover what was most important, the life skill, about the project, activity, or service opportunity. The last two steps are part of apply. Generalize, so what? Identify how to use what's been learned in real life. Apply, what's next? How can the information gained be applied to real life situations?
Let's spend a few minutes applying the experiential learning model to something you do in your Master Gardener work. Think of a program or event that you could work with youth or a group of community members. Identify at least one learning objective that is part of that experience. Next, write at least 2 reflect or apply questions that you could use to ask young people after they do the experience. Remember to use open-ended questions, ones that require more than a yes or no answer. We will take 3 minutes to do this and be back with you soon.
Thank you for taking the time to think intentionally about how you might apply the experiential learning model. Some potential questions that you could ask include, what did you learn while doing this activity? How did you feel? What was easiest? What surprised you? What did you learn about yourself? How did others help you? Have you had similar experiences to this activity? How do you think this project relates to your everyday life? Did you have any others that you'd like to share? If you haven't had a chance to share and there are people that would like to share, feel free to pause. We just spent time reviewing some of the principles and practices that are the foundation of our 4-H Youth Development Program. One last component that is vital to our program's success, as is evidenced by the inclusion in our mission, is youth-adult partnerships. A youth-adult partnership is a joint effort, youth and adults working together to achieve common goals. Caring adults bring knowledge, experience, and access to resources, while youth bring fresh ideas, new perspectives, energy, enthusiasm, and talents. To make a partnership successful, adults need to be willing to share their power and responsibility. Youth need to be willing to gain power and take on responsibility. Both youth and adults need the skills to work successfully together. And everyone needs to forget everything they have ever thought about youth and adults as separate groups and start treating each other with respect and as allies. Everyone benefits when successful youth-adult partnerships occur. Youth engaged in practicing youth-adult partnerships increase self-esteem, increase the ability to think and act in responsible ways, and increase problem-solving skills when they have opportunities to contribute to a common goal and engage in positive relationships with caring adults. They're empowered by working and learning with caring adults. They gain a sense of belonging. They gain new respect and acceptance from adults and serve as role models for other youth and their community. Adults engaged in practicing youth-adult partnerships can change negative attitudes and stereotypes about youth, can get re-energized and enthusiastic about their own work when they partner with young people, and can increase their communication, teamwork, and coaching skills. 4-H programs, communities, and organizations engaged in practicing youth-adult partnerships are strengthened when all members, including youth, are actively involved. We become more connected and responsive to youth and are better able to serve youth, see the benefits when involving youth in responsible positions and want to involve more youth in responsible roles, and demonstrate the role of youth to community organizations. To wrap up the program overview piece, I'm going to review our program priority areas to set the stage for Laura. Our program priorities are content areas which we focus on when delivering our programs. It helps us be intentional in our work. The 4 program priorities are healthy living, leadership and civic engagement, STEM, which stands for science, technology, engineering, and math, and communications and the arts. These 4 areas are cross-disciplinary and align with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, 4-H National Headquarters, and statewide initiatives.
4-H Healthy Living programs help youth lead lives that balance their physical, mental, emotional, and social well-being. Do a search on garden-based learning, and you will find many pages of research, youth development, and educational program information affirming garden-based learning as a positive catalyst to help youth reach their full potential. Dozens of Iowa agriculture, environmental, food and nutrition, and education partners support connecting living and learning curricula because they know that garden-based learning can be done in all educational settings. It increases lifelong interests, knowledge, and participation in food systems. Garden-based learning is universal because everyone eats and we all have a part in sustaining the environment to continue to grow our food and protect our water and air. Garden-based learning teaches life skills and content knowledge so students can learn to make healthy choices and how to grow food at the same time. They learn science, math, language arts, social studies, health, and the arts. Garden-based learning ultimately connects learning to living on planet Earth. And as the Iowa 4-H Youth Development Program, we strive to offer programming to help youth become productive citizens and leaders for our future. Our mission with the 4-H Healthy Living program area is to create new programs and opportunities that engage our youth, our volunteers, and our staff to help better their personal, their community, and their global well-being. With our webinar today, we want to introduce possible opportunities to engage our youth in experiential learning through hands-on activities in a garden or learning how food is grown and the process that goes into these methods. We also hope you as Master Gardeners learn of new ways you may see yourself as a volunteer with youth audiences, and we will provide guidance and resources for those opportunities. Through these unique learning opportunities where youth grow their knowledge and experience by doing,
We envision youth taking these impressionable life lessons beyond the classroom or outside of this activity and exploring it in new ways where they can influence others. We have a collection of resources and curriculum with the 4-H program related to gardening, local foods, and engaging youth audiences in an outdoor classroom setting. I'm going to review 3 of those products with you today, and the first one is called Growing in the Garden. This curriculum consists of 7 different units, which includes 41 lessons. And these lessons cover an array of topics, which include our natural resources, plants, their different parts and how they grow, animals, food and nutrition, how to prepare foods grown in the garden in a healthy way, outdoor classrooms, and gardening. The content is meant for kindergarten through 3rd grade youth, but lessons can be adapted to also involve parents in those educational topics. The lessons and units work progressively if you so chose to work from start to end and incorporate all the lessons, but it's also flexible, where you can just pick one topic at a time and do it individually. Many county offices already have this resource on file, so if this is a resource you want to look into, we encourage you to talk with your county extension office staff and see if they have it available. Otherwise, it is available to purchase on the extension store for $25. The second curriculum I'm going to share about is called Growing in the Garden, Local Foods and Healthy Living. This is a different version of the curriculum I just explained, and it covers topics related to the full process of growing produce, from the pre-garden planning stage through the process of harvest, and then learning about how to grow foods locally and how to run taste tests through the sampling process. It provides resources that encourage youth and families to try new foods and consume more fruits and vegetables. Each of the 7 units in this curriculum has 2 lessons. The first lesson is for youth in grades kindergarten through 4th grade, and the second lesson featured is for youth in grades 4th through 8th grade. This flexibility makes the content relevant for youth of all ages. The appendix has great resources on fun activities that can be incorporated with youth, such as why local foods are good for them game, great tasters and how to run taste tests, and how to get school gardens started in a community. This resource is available on our extension store for free electronic download. So contact your county extension staff person and ask for them to help you access this resource. They possibly may have a hard copy of this file as well. The final curriculum I'm going to share about is called Junior Master Gardeners Learn, Grow, Eat, and Go. This curriculum is made up of 20 lessons that feature how plants grow, proper steps for gardening, trying new foods, and overall better nutrition. It is composed of 5 different sections. So the first section is Learn. This features 20 lessons laid out in a 10-week plan. The lessons include learning how plants grow, how to grow them in a garden, how to harvest, and then tasting. Student journals are incorporated where weekly questions are posed to the youth that coordinate with each lesson to help them reflect on what they learned about and how they can apply it when they go back home. The second section is Grow. This features a school garden kit, and it explains how to prepare and plant a garden with charts and garden map tools. Although the directions refer to school gardens, this resource can be used for a community gardening setting as well. The third section is Eat. This section focuses on taste testing fruits or vegetables from a garden. Recipes are provided in English and Spanish, and it includes food preparation tips and knife skills. The fourth section is Go. This incorporates physical activity into the lesson. It features 10 group activities that can be included each week. And then the last section is an exclamation point. This stands for community service. This section focuses on service learning and how youth can create projects to do in their community. It also contains a volunteer schedule matrix and parent handouts that coordinate with each week. This is a resource that can be utilized in schools, but also through community programming. It was developed by Texas A&M University Extension, and it can be purchased through their webpage, or you can work with your local extension office to see if it is a resource they already have. In a moment, we are going to provide some time for you to have some group discussion and brainstorming. But first, I would like to provide a few examples of how Master Gardeners can engage with youth by sharing your expertise on gardening and food production to educate youth in your communities. I'm going to review a few ideas to get you started as possible options of getting involved with youth in your county. So first, some of our counties across the state have 4-H garden clubs where youth engage in the gardens and the growing process of food. So would you be interested in assisting with a garden club that might exist in your county? Or would you be open to being a guest presenter and visiting with them to share your expertise? Second, there are several 4-H clubs in your county with youth ranging from kindergarten through 12th grade. Would you like to visit a club meeting and share what you do? To give youth a little taste of what a Master Gardener is and what they learn about and how they help their communities. Third, your county extension office has a staff member designated to 4-H youth programming. Would you be interested in partnering with them to put together a program or a workshop, whether that is helping identify the content or even helping deliver it? 4, you can partner with a 4-H club leader and help provide ideas for an activity that they could hold during a club meeting to expose youth in a different setting to new information related to health and gardening. The 5th point is, do you know of a service opportunity 4-H youth could get involved in and help with in your community? So is there a project that your Master Gardener group does annually and you would value having a few extra hands to be helping out? Your youth audience is a great group to consider offering some volunteer opportunities to. And the last point is horticulture is one of the project areas through 4-H featured at our county fairs. They are often looking for experts in these areas to help judge these fair entries. So have you thought about being a judge at a local county fair? If that interests you, definitely reach out to your county extension office staff and see what opportunities they might have. As Master Gardeners, you may be well aware of Growing Together Iowa MiniGrants. These are offered annually to help fund materials for Master Gardener food security projects. MiniGrants can be used to purchase things like seeds, fencing, and harvest supplies for donation gardens. The produce harvested from these gardens are then donated to local food pantries to benefit community members in need. The deadline for application for the 2018 year was on January 11th. You may have been one of those applicants, and if so, we encourage you to seek 4-H youth involvement to help assist with your project if you're looking for more hands in the garden. If you did not apply this year, please know this is funded through a SNAP education program that is promoted through ISU Extension and Outreach, and stay tuned for application opportunities for 2019 later on this fall. Now that we've shared some possible opportunities, we want your group to take some time and think about the projects you have planned for the year, or if you're looking to introduce new opportunities, list those ideas on the worksheet under the question, what projects do you have planned this year? We have the discussion timer set for 3 minutes, so if you need more time, feel free to pause the video and then push play when you're ready to continue. Now that you've taken time to lay out the ideas or project goals as a group, let's think of ways you can incorporate youth involvement into what you already have planned, or what are new projects that would involve youth, whether they are your target audience. For example, you lead a garden workshop for youth and their families, or you visit 4-H clubs in your county and lead a lesson. Or are they your partner in program delivery? For example, they assist you with starting a donation garden. Or you assign them a week to come help water and weed a garden. Or they help you deliver the harvest to food pantries, or put together recipes on how to cook with those produce items. So now take the next 5 minutes to discuss these possibilities and the goals you have for the year and how you might engage youth audience into your plan. We hope this training has provided your group the time to think through your program plan and identify some new goals, as well as open the door to new opportunities where you can share your knowledge and passion of gardening with youth in your communities. Your ability to share your gifts with youth may spark a new interest in them and a direction they'd like to explore as they grow. So as you look back at the questions you've discussed today, evaluate the plans and ideas you have come up with. What seems feasible to incorporate this year? Can you add it to your program plans and goals for 2018? If you are interested in engaging with youth audiences, list 1 to 2 goals on your worksheet of how you plan to do so this year. We recommend you reach out to your County Extension Office staff and share these plans with them and see how you can work together to make this youth and adult partnership flourish. Thank you for tuning into our webinar today.
Wonderful. Thanks, Laura and Tillie. Now we're going to hear from Carrie Chennault, who is a graduate student in the graduate program in sustainable agriculture here at Iowa State University.
Hi, my name is Carrie Chennault, and I'm a PhD candidate in sustainable agriculture at Iowa State University. I'm also a graduate research assistant for Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. And this Master Gardener 2017 winter webinar is entitled Reimagining Food Access in Iowa's Community Food Systems. Growing Together Iowa is a community donation gardening project. Iowa State University Extension and Outreach designed a multi-year project funded through USDA SNAP Education. The partners for Growing Together have been ISU EO, Master Gardener, ISU Research Farms, community gardens across the state, as well as food banks and pantries, other recipient agencies, and community partners. And the objective of the project has been to grow, harvest, and donate produce. The map here shows the 2017 participating counties across Iowa in red. The participating counties often have anywhere from 1 to 5 or even more community garden sites that are part of the project. The green dots on the map show participating ISU research farms. At all of these sites, local master gardeners are coordinating or helping coordinate the growing, harvesting, and donating of produce. Because of the success we've had in Iowa, other universities such as the University of Wisconsin, the University of Nebraska, and Purdue University have started similar programs this year, and additional states have projects in the works. So I want to give you a little bit of background about what I do and why it's important to me. I come to the Growing Together project as an interdisciplinary social sciences researcher, and I've also been brought on the project to assist with evaluation. I engage in community-based and participatory research, and my area of research is community food systems. Growing Together involves training, funding, supporting, researching, and evaluating master gardeners across the state in developing community donation gardens and building relationships with food pantries and other food recipient agencies. In my role as a graduate research assistant over the past 2 years, I have visited approximately 24 garden and pantry sites. In this most recent year, 2017, my research brought me to 10 of the counties participating in the Growing Together MiniGrants, as well as 4 of the demonstration gardens at ISU Research Farms. In the course of these events, I have observed, talked to, interviewed, trained, and assisted alongside donation gardeners and food pantry personnel. And in the process, I have learned about community food systems advocacy. Alongside my studies and research during graduate school, I volunteered for several years in Ames at Food at First, which is a local food pantry and meal program. And I became a co-leader at a community donation garden that my graduate program started to support Food at First. I became interested in community donation gardening because, among many reasons, I saw how little access to fresh fruits and vegetables many people in Ames have, which is such a shame because we really have great soil here in Iowa that could support growing far more produce. And we also have lots of people with farming and gardening knowledge who can make a real impact in their communities through growing and sharing food. What I also noticed is that community food systems work provides a lot more than the opportunity to grow and share food, though those are certainly important parts of it. I began to see other possibilities for communities to reimagine themselves as something different than they are today, for community members to build connections in parts of their community where they may have had few previous connections, for people to learn about and learn from one another, for community members to increase their support and care for one another, for community members to grow and share food, but also to address food insecurity at a much deeper level than donating food alone. Doing so would mean facing some tough challenges head-on, including ending the stigmas and shame we attach to food insecurity. It would mean facing issues of racism and systemic bias and actually taking on the collective responsibility of building a different type, a more just, caring, and connected food system in our communities. For those of you who have participated in Growing Together or in similar community food systems efforts, these ideas may resonate with your ideas and experiences. For those of you who are new to Growing Together or haven't participated in community food systems projects before, some of what I discussed today may be new. Regardless, I encourage everyone tuning into the webinar to consider the concepts and research findings in the presentation, and to participate in the reflection and discussion exercises, which I include throughout the presentation. To get us started, I'm going to pose a question, a sort of collective experiment or go-experiment with each of you listening, and I hope you'll follow along with me. This question has been important to me personally and inspired my research. Before diving into the presentation, I want to acknowledge that my perspective is just one of many. I expect everyone listening to this presentation will have diverse life experiences and viewpoints, ones that differ from my own. Because we all have different backgrounds and experiences that shape our lives, I'm excited to give you a glimpse into how I have come to think about communities and food systems, and how all of that has been informed by my involvement in Growing Together, which many Master Gardeners across the state have also participated in for the last 2 growing seasons. After you listen to the video, I encourage you to engage in conversations, to reflect on this presentation and share how your life experiences contribute to the conversation on community food systems. I come to study food through a lens of food justice. Having worked to address food insecurity in my communities and having myself once experienced food insecurity, I have imagined a different world, what things could be like. I asked, what if food were a right for all? What would our world look like? What would our community food systems look like? And finally, what would Growing Together look like? In my research, I observed and interviewed partners in Growing Together across the state. I explored the question, were any of the communities and partnerships treating food as a right for all? During today's presentation, I'll first define some of the important concepts so that we can begin to examine the idea of food as a right for all. Then, I'll talk about some of my findings and share a story with you from one participating county. Finally, I'll wrap up the presentation by discussing some of the causes of food insecurity. Better understanding these causes may help your communities as you participate in Growing Together and as you envision and enact efforts within your community food system. Periodically throughout the presentation, I'll encourage you to pause the video momentarily for some short exercises. So, with the question, what if food were a right for all? Let's start our experiment together. Section 1. Defining concepts. Food as a right for all. What does that mean? Why Hunger's Nourishing Change newsletter recently defined food as a right for all as food that is accessible both physically and economically, food that is adequate for optimal health and nutrition, food that is available through means that promote self-determination and dignity, and food that is produced and consumed with environmental sustainability front and center. Now that we've covered the definition, let's think about how it plays out in our lives and in our communities. The relationship between oneself, one's community, and food depends on a multitude of factors, including the following. Your food culture. This might include what you like to grow, cook, or eat. It includes special recipes, family food traditions, community food events, and gatherings with shared meals. Food emotions. How food makes you feel, either growing it, sharing it, or eating it. I like to think of the joy I experience from my first garden harvest each spring, and food involves a range of emotions and experiences. Food health. How what you eat nourishes your mind and body. And also, importantly, it's how food and agricultural systems impact both human and environmental health. Food access. How you access healthy and culturally appropriate food. It can include buying, growing, or sharing food. It also involves the transportation, logistics, time, and resources required to do so. Not all members of our communities are able to access a grocery store, afford to shop at one, or have the time and space to garden and preserve food. Food decisions. How much say you and your fellow community members have in the programs and policies that affect the agricultural and food systems around us? What are community members' roles in these decisions? Maybe you've decided to help start a community garden. Or maybe you are a client at a food pantry who joined the pantry's board. Or maybe you've started an advocacy group to promote living wages for agricultural and food systems workers. When thinking about food decisions, the programs and policies, it's important to think about who has a say and who's been left out of the process. Finally, your community food system. It's the big picture of your community, the way it comes together to promote all of the above aspects of food for all members of your community. Now I'll encourage you to take a minute to pause the video. Think about how each factor applies to you and your community. Then, if you are watching the video with a group, I encourage you to ask the group for volunteers to share examples of how one or more factors applies to you personally and in your communities. In my research across Iowa's communities, I've seen how food is such an important part of everyone's lives and relationships. Across your community, you will find a diversity of traditions, emotions, and lived experiences related to food. I want to pause for a second here and reflect on this idea of a diversity of experiences. In all of our communities, we have the opportunity to work together to value, to promote, to build up people's experiences, to make sure that people's food cultures are promoted, even when those cultures are unlike our own, to develop opportunities for our fellow community members to experience all the emotional and health benefits of food, to make sure that no one is without access to food itself, and also to related resources such as land and transportation. With the diversity of experiences comes a diversity of ideas about the programs and policies that would foster better agricultural and food systems. And communities have the opportunity to be more inclusive in decision-making processes than they have in the past. These are exciting opportunities for people to make new connections with their food and with one another. Yet these opportunities will take some work that I've seen happening on the ground across the state in several of the communities participating and growing together. The reason why it will take hard work and determination is that, unfortunately, not everyone in our communities across the state has the same level of access to food, the same level of influence in decisions and policies, or the same level of access to any of the other factors just discussed. Because of the stigma and shame associated with food insecurity, it can be easy to blame people for their situation. It can be tempting to judge people's decisions and actions and to associate their actions with their right to food. In my research across Iowa, I've encountered these perspectives. Yet, I also encountered communities who were trying to break free of the stigmas and shame associated with food insecurity, to shift the past dynamics and establish the right for food as a basic right. Let's return to our collective experiment. What if food were a right for all? What would our community food systems look like? I said a couple slides ago that community food systems can play a role in shifting the dynamics of inequity and insecurity. I also provided a definition of food as a right. To get to that place in communities takes a lot of effort, like, for instance, the efforts of master gardeners in the Growing Together projects across the state. Bradley and Herrera used the term food justice to describe the following types of efforts. They describe the practical efforts of communities to, quote, establish fair, equitable access to fresh, healthy, affordable, culturally appropriate food in vulnerable neighborhoods, especially low-income neighborhoods and communities of color, with ownership and governance of the means of production and exchange accessible to the people who eat this healthy food. The key words that they emphasize here are fair, equitable, fresh, healthy, affordable, and culturally appropriate. They also emphasize ownership and governance. And you can see how many parts of their definition fit in with the factors I just mentioned on the previous pages. There are lots of definitions of community food security, food justice, and food equity out there. What they all emphasize are the efforts of people like you and me, working collectively in their communities to address these challenging issues head on. Let's move now to section 2 of my presentation, and in this section I go in depth with some of my research findings. Food as a right for all, what communities in Iowa are doing. In my research across communities participating in Growing Together, I explored how community members were perceiving and practicing food security. Among these questions, I explored, were any of the participating communities starting to or already thinking and acting as if food were a right for all? And if so, what exactly were these communities doing? What were some of their everyday practices that reflected these principles? Were they collectively experimenting with new practices? And finally, what lessons could we all learn from these communities? In this section, I discuss findings from one Iowa community participating in Growing Together. One gardener participant is closely working with non-white and immigrant members of the community. Grocery stores, farmers markets, seed stores, and local gardening programs have not been producing enough culturally appropriate foods, according to the gardener. The gardener also noted instances in neighborhoods of this community where people who can are traveling upwards of 2 hours to the nearest large city to purchase culturally appropriate foods from markets that sell them. The gardener also noted that in some of the poorest neighborhoods in this community, there's little access to any fresh food or quality grocery stores, and community members are relying on convenience stores to purchase food. The gardener had observed all of these challenges in the community and wanted to do something about it. Yet the gardener felt frustrated by previous approaches to poor communities of color and poor immigrant communities. The gardener said that the demographic and cultural changes were commonly viewed as what was wrong with the city. The gardener, a lifelong resident of this city, had witnessed decades of policies and planning decisions that isolated Black and immigrant community members in neighborhoods where they had no access to quality, affordable housing, food, or other resources needed for livelihood. Scholars define this situation as structural racism. Simply put, structural racism is the normalized and legitimized range of policies, practices, and attitudes that routinely produce cumulative and chronic adverse outcomes for people of color, especially Black people. The gardener has been active in voicing concern. Here is a quote from my interview with the gardener, which problematizes the isolation of poor, Black, and immigrant communities into substandard neighborhoods. Quote, "And I have said this at a city meeting. I said, you have to look at how you created this. You put the majority of people you think are like-minded in one area. And I said, and you close their lids. I said, when you're closing lids to economic livelihood, to jobs, a decent place to learn, decent food, medical attention, even entertainment. And now they're all there and there's only one way to get out. I said, here's an analogy. If you put a bunch of lab rats in a box and you close the lid, how are they going to get out? They got to fight each other to get to the top. That's what you have here. I said, now our challenge is how do we get them out? How do we get them out? But more importantly, do you want them out? And I said, There's our challenge, end quote. Despite all these challenges, the gardener has found many allies within the community. Together, they have been collectively experimenting or co-experimenting with ways to build a better, more just, and equitable community food system that serves these neighborhoods. The gardener has been part of a collaboration to provide education, workshops, cooking spaces, gardening spaces, and infrastructure available for community members. The gardeners helped build raised beds in neighborhood backyards and focused on seed starters of different vegetables than the typical ones found in Midwestern gardens, and also has been teaching people how to start from seeds. The gardeners partnered with marginalized community members, building relationships with them and generating resources for their neighborhoods. And here I'd like to emphasize that the resources the communities want are not just community gardens. This gardener and other master gardeners working in these neighborhoods have routinely and repeatedly discussed the need for decent grocery stores. Community gardening alone, while it is definitely contributing to the community, is not sufficient without paying attention to some of the broader needs of the neighborhood. And I'll end here with one final quote from the gardener, and this quote emphasizes connections. Quote, "I do a lot of it with just connecting with people, just helping them understand what it is to grow something. How do I grow it? Where do I get things? Just to really move them forward with it, because a lot of times they don't know. They don't know the resources out there, what's out there." End quote. I gathered many photos during my research across the state, and here is one photo of a group of raised beds that were built in this community. The gardener took me on a tour of some of the efforts that have been going on, and I was able to snap a few photographs of raised beds, backyard gardens, and other similar efforts. For the second exercise, the master gardener in the story worked with communities to create a more equitable and just community food system. Their collective initiatives have involved a range of projects, a few of which I just mentioned. Do you think the projects promote the food as a right factors discussed at the beginning of the presentation? That is, culture, emotions, health, access, and decisions within a community food system? And if so, how? I encourage groups watching the video to take a couple minutes here and pause to discuss their answers amongst each other. In this final section of today's presentation, I consider food as a right for all. Why is achieving it so difficult, and why does it need to be a community effort? In this section, I explore some of the causes of food insecurity and inequity. I've just shared with you a story from one community in Iowa, and during field research, I've encountered numerous other communities across the state with similar stories. One question that some people might ask when watching this webinar is, why does it take a community to make food a right for all? The answer is simple. When we look at the causes of food inequity and insecurity, we find that the causes are much deeper than any single individual or family, and really much deeper than any one single community. Research has provided us with a good understanding of why food inequity and insecurity happen. Namely, our social system is not structured to fully support and promote food cultures, food emotions, food health, food access, food decisions, and community food systems. Further compounding the issue, societal attitudes have made food insecurity a stigma by casting it as an individual problem rather than a community and societal one. Community members working together do have an opportunity to begin addressing some of these issues, even though, of course, more work also needs to be done at state, regional, national, and international levels of our agricultural and food systems. With that context in mind, I'm going to talk about some of the reasons researchers have found that food inequity and insecurity exist. Just to get us started, it's an interesting fact that Iowa ranks 50th in fruit and vegetable consumption in the country, which means that for many Iowans, even if you have plenty of calories to eat, you may not have easy access to fruits and vegetables, especially fresh ones. For people experiencing food insecurity, there are a host of challenges to accessing fruits, vegetables, and other healthy, culturally appropriate foods. These challenges include our economic system, and specifically that involves low and/or unreliable income sources, regressive taxation policies, unfair labor relations, and unsafe working conditions, among others. Next, physical access. And as I just mentioned a moment ago, Iowa is ranked 50th in fruit and vegetable consumption. So one of these issues of physical access is low access to fresh fruits and vegetables and other healthy and culturally appropriate foods. But it's also low access to land and other resources to grow food. And currently, there's not enough locally and regionally grown produce to meet the needs in Iowa without importing food. Next is economic access, and that's lack of affordability. It's expensive to purchase culturally appropriate and healthy, especially fresh foods relative to other food options, and it can be expensive to obtain land and resources. Next are the demands. It's time-consuming and physically and emotionally demanding to grow, obtain, and prepare food. Next on the list are gaps in infrastructure and programming. For a few examples of infrastructure and programming challenges in communities related to accessing or growing food, you might consider lack of public transportation, insufficient pedestrian infrastructure, distance to markets, lack of accessible public garden space, neighborhoods where apartments and housing lack lawn space to grow food, school districts in which meal programs are cut off during the summer, and there are many, many more. Next on the list is low community participation. And this means low participation in local and regional agri-food systems, as well as lack of community or communal reliance and the absence of alternative and sharing food economies. Finally, I want to emphasize that all of these factors are tied to social marginalizations. Research in the social sciences has explored how race, gender, class, age, ability, and other categories are the means by which society assigns food as a right to some but not to others. In my research in Iowa, I have found that this topic is uncomfortable or difficult for many communities to discuss. But I bring it up here because both the qualitative data in my research and the qualitative and quantitative data from other studies has borne this fact. To the extent that community members want to address inequity in the food system, then these efforts would greatly benefit from understanding how each of these marginalizations has historically played out and continues to play out in communities and in society. You may identify with or understand some of these marginalizations more than others, and that's a good place to start and then branch out. For instance, people who are food insecure typically have little say in planning and decision-making in the food system. I have seen this firsthand in my research, and other researchers have reported this too, yet we could all learn much from those who know about food insecurity firsthand. This list is by no means exhaustive, but it gives you a sense of how challenging it is to address big systemic issues of food insecurity and inequity. Yet communities in Iowa, across the country, and around the world are doing just that. In this third and final exercise, I encourage you to reflect on the causes of food inequity and food insecurity. If you have experienced or were to experience food insecurity, what would be some of the challenges you would face in your community? How might they be different than the challenges that someone from a different background would face? Do you see a role that your community can play in addressing these challenges? Once you've taken a minute to reflect individually, I encourage groups watching the video to take a couple minutes to share their reflections amongst each other. I just discussed several of the causes of food insecurity and inequity and encouraged you to reflect upon them and on what your community can do in response. Throughout today's presentation, I've described the possibility of communities coming together to promote food as a right for all. In closing, I want to leave you with a list of principles that you might consider as you work collectively in your communities to build a better food system. Two researchers from the University of Minnesota, Kirsten Cadieux and Rachel Slocum, published an article that listed 4 organizing principles for building a more just food system. They recommended, number 1, acknowledging and confronting historical collective social trauma and persistent race, gender, and class inequalities. Second, designing exchange mechanisms that build communal reliance and control. Third, creating innovative ways to control, use, share, own, manage, and conceive of land and ecologies in general that place them outside the speculative market and the rationale of extraction. And fourth, pursuing labor relations that guarantee a minimum income and are neither alienating nor dependent on unpaid social reproduction by women. In my research across Growing Together's collective efforts in Iowa, I've met master gardeners and other community food system participants who are putting parts or all of these principles into action. As the project continues and expands, both in Iowa and in other states, I encourage communities to take these factors into consideration, to ask what their community would look like if food were a right for all. I also want to leave you with a few resources from ISU Extension and Outreach. On the ISU-EO Master Gardener website, there's information about the 2016-2017 projects and applications and information about the upcoming 2018 MiniGrants. ISU-EO also is developing an online community donation gardening toolkit, which I am helping to put together, and that will be released in 2018. Finally, the Inequities in the Food Systems webpage on the ISU-EO Local Foods website has helpful resources and definitions. I want to acknowledge all of the academic and practitioner resources I used in putting together today's presentation. I also want to thank all of the funders that have supported my research, as well as faculty, staff, and students on the Growing Together project, team members in the Local Foods program and ISU Extension and Outreach, my academic advisors and dissertation committee, and finally, a big special thanks to the participants in Growing Together across the state of Iowa.